Good morning, everybody. My name is Heather Knox. I'm an AUSA here in Rapid City, South Dakota. I've been with the Department of Justice since 2018, a prosecutor since 2013, also here in Rapid City. I'm assigned to the Pine Ridge Reservation, so I do violent crime, which includes all kinds of things like sexual assaults, physical assaults, child exploitation. I work with the ICAC task force to do child exploitation prosecutions. I'm also the human trafficking coordinator for the District of South Dakota. So human trafficking cases within the state come through me, or at least I'm a point of contact for those. We certainly have AUSAs in all of our offices who prosecute those cases. And we're certainly seeing an influx, greater numbers of those cases. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you, first of all, I should have said, first of all, Tanya, Gail, Brooke, for having me here to talk about Esther Wolfe and what she survived in 2018 and 2019, and beyond that, because her criminal case wasn't fully resolved until earlier this year. So not only did she survive what I'm going to tell you about, she also survived going through the criminal justice system, quote unquote, criminal justice system, enduring what she endured there, being re-victimized there through attacks by her abusers. So this is the story of Esther Wolfe, who I met finally in 2019. First of all, I've said that twice now. So third of all, I want to let you all know that the content of my presentation, at least parts of it, are difficult. The descriptions of what Esther survived are hard to take, hard to listen to, even if I didn't have some visual aids. They involve graphic, unspeakable, really, violence, sexual violence, physical violence, strangulation. So even if you don't carry with you a lived experience of that particular kind of trauma, it will be traumatic. So please take gentle and good care of yourselves throughout the next half an hour. If you need to step out, I certainly will not be offended. Please just take care of yourselves. I do not mean for any of this to be gratuitous in nature, to just get up here and be like, wow, look at this great work we did. This is really a story about Esther, what she endured, the capacity of the human spirit to be resilient and to survive, because as you'll see, she could be, I wish she were walking among us and that you'd never know, but she's not. And you'll hear about that too. All right, so this started as a federal prosecution in 2019, although Esther was kidnapped from Rapid City. So many of you, I think there's a particular knowledge among Indigenous folks about issues of jurisdiction because her kidnappers took her across state and tribal lines twice. We had federal jurisdiction, we had an interstate nexus to many of the crimes. Many of the crimes committed upon her occurred in Oglala, in Indian country, so we had jurisdiction there as well. Both of the Sierra brothers, Jesse, who was Esther's boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, and his brother Dustin are enrolled members of the Oglala Sioux tribe. So we had jurisdiction over them for the offenses they perpetrated on her, certainly on the Pine Ridge Reservation. That said, the counties could have prosecuted her. The state's attorney's office up here in Rapid City could have prosecuted her. You'll hear Nebraska could have prosecuted, not her, I'm sorry, them, the Sierra brothers, and he was charged in multiple jurisdictions. All right, so I first heard or saw Esther's face in July of 2019, sometime after she had been kidnapped. It was not known initially what happened to her. Did she go voluntarily? There was a history of domestic violence, but she had gone missing from her workplace, which was the Hilton Garden Inn here in Rapid City, on July 13th, 2019. So Detective Steve Neville with the Rapid City Police Department is getting calls. He puts out a fusion alert, a bulletin, which says, we've got an endangered person. She's believed to be in the company of Jesse Sierra. They've got some domestic violence history, and she had been in a relationship with him. So her family, Esther's family, that is, certainly knew that Esther was in grave danger. They knew who Jesse was. They knew what he had done to her. She had, in fact, reported some of the domestic violence. He had been prosecuted for it in Denver and convicted of it in Denver. So it wasn't a situation which is common where domestic violence is so insidious and goes unreported often. But she had made many attempts to report, and most of those assaults upon her had never been prosecuted. So it was grave danger. I, like many of you, flip through Facebook and see somebody's missing, and there's this bulletin here. And something about her face, I mean, you can see she's beautiful, but something about her and him just gave me a feeling, like I knew something was wrong. But we see these bulletins all the time. People go missing all the time. But something struck me about Esther. The family was panicked. Esther had gone missing on what was her niece's birthday. Now, Esther had just gotten guardianship of her niece. There was no way she was going to miss the birthday. There was no way. There was no way she wasn't going to come home from work that day. Esther had broken off the relationship with Jesse. She was moving on. She was working. She was earning her own money. They had not been in contact in the months leading up to July 2019 because he had been in jail in Pennington County and then was extradited to Denver for violating probation for committing domestic assault against Esther there. So Jesse Sierra had been in Denver County Jail. Esther knew that to some extent and was moving on. And we all know in this work that that's when it's most dangerous for someone like her. And it certainly was. Esther told me about the Denver incident, which had happened 2 years prior. She told me Jesse and she had been in a hotel room in Denver. He'd gotten mad about some slight, however large or small he perceived it to be. He physically assaulted her, wrapped her hair in the wheels of a rolling chair, threw all of her belongings, all of her makeup, everything she had with her, which was everything she owned at the time, out the hotel window. And thankfully, I believe her sister was with her, one of the sisters, and called the police, and it was prosecuted. So there were many incidents of violence. At the time, Esther was about 18, and Jesse was 11 years older than her. So there was definitely a power differential there, and she was very vulnerable as a result of that as well. Interestingly, sadly, Esther's 2019 was not the first time Jesse Sierra had kidnapped Esther. He had done it in 2018 as well. And he had taken her from Star Village. He'd taken her dog, which if you're working in the domestic violence sphere, animal abuse it's a real threat. He took a dog that she loved, threatened to kill it, goes to get her in Star Village, says, no, I'll bring you right back. I promise. We're just going to talk about the relationship, right? She gets in, but she knows him. She knows he's violent. She begs, really, one of her friends to come with her, and the friend does. So they get in this gold-colored Cadillac or something, and instead of driving around Rapid City and talking about the relationship, Jesse hightails it to Oglala, where his family has land, kidnaps her, literally. I mean, that's what he did is kidnapping. She didn't want to go. She wanted to be let out. He kidnaps her to the reservation, beats her there, sexually assaults her there, hits her with a crowbar. He tells her, we're going to be together, things like that. The very, very typical, very standard domestic abuser type of things. Beats her, says, if you tell anybody, I'm going to kill you, but I'm going to let you live. And he does. After sexually assaulting her, he lets her back in the vehicle, drives her back home with her friend. Her friend's terrified in the backseat of this car, too scared to look at what's happening, but she can hear this assault happening, right? Returns her to Box Elder, South Dakota on the same day. Tells her, if you tell the police, I'm going to kill you. But Esther is able to bolt from the vehicle out in Box Elder. She runs to a gas station, calls her sister. Sister comes and gets her. They call the police and go to what is now Oyate Health Center, formerly IHS, Susan. And her injuries are photographed. She tells what happened to her. She gives a good report. A local law enforcement officer takes the report, writes it up, sends it to the FBI. The ball gets dropped. The case stalls. After the assault, Esther moved to North Carolina with a sister and her family to be safe, and Esther was called uncooperative. She was called uncooperative, and then the case stalled. So Jesse was never prosecuted for the first assault until 2019 when we charged him. July 13, 2019 is when Esther disappears from the Hilton Garden Inn. This is a picture of one of the many images of surveillance video that the police officers got from the Hilton Garden Inn. It shows Jesse lurking really around the hotel while Esther's working as a housekeeper. He's lurking there by the elevator doors, and she comes around the corner and sees him. She doesn't know he's coming. He hasn't told her he's coming. But he shows up there and waits around, and he's kind of harassing the housekeeping staff, like, where is she? And then harassing Esther, like, come on, let's go, like, let's go. She goes into what she testified as survival mode. You can see on this video, which is like pretty good. It's a little choppy because of the way the frames go, but you can see her recognize like this, oh no, kind of moment. And then she goes into survival mode. She doesn't freeze, she doesn't fight, she doesn't scream. What she does is fawn. She knows she's got to people please him because she knows what he's capable of. Jesse's brother Dustin had dropped him off there at the motel, and Dustin waited outside. Dustin has his 5-year-old child with him. At this point, we don't know if Dustin knew the full scheme of what was about to happen, but we certainly know what he did and didn't do later. So Esther knows she has no chance to get away from him. She knows what happened in 2018. She knows he can find her wherever she is. She knows it. So she decides to go with him. She decides she's going to placate him to stay alive. So she goes with him. He says he's kind of like going to wine and dine her and says, I'll take you out to eat. So they do. He takes her to the Golden Corral, where he buys her a meal. They share a meal together. And if you don't know what's going on under the surface, it looks like everything's fine. It looks like a couple who's going out to eat and everything is fine. This is a picture of surveillance video from the Golden Corral. There's much video of this through the whole interaction. At a certain point, Dustin, the brother, and his child also come into the Golden Corral. They pick up Jesse and Esther, and they go. I talked about fawning. Now I want to be clear that fawning is not, and people-pleasing is no less of a defense mechanism than fighting, freezing, fleeing. It is not a conscious choice, I wouldn't say. It is what Esther had to do in order to keep Jesse happy, in order to just get out of this situation, to just get through this and to try to manage what's about to happen. All right, while Jesse and Esther have been eating at Golden Corral, Dustin and his kid go into the Walmart. They're driving a white Chevy Avalanche. They go in and get groceries, and then this is the point at which we can see Dustin's vehicle driving past the Golden Corral outside surveillance video. So law enforcement did a good job of, thanks to what Esther was able to say later, collected all of this video, which corroborated everything she said. She said, we were there was video of it. All of this is due to Esther's great recounting of what happened and law enforcement's quick work to get the video before it was gone. So Dustin's Avalanche is circling. They go in, they get Esther and Jesse. Then Jesse says, he tells another lie, which is, I got to go to 24/7. So if you're from Pennington County, you know 24/7 is where if you're court ordered to do PBTs or UAs, you go to 24/7 and you either blow or you give your urine. It's a lie. He has no intention of going in. I don't even think he was court ordered at that time to do UAs. But he goes in, and so Esther's sitting in the car with him. And, thank you. She's starting to feel her panic rise. Like she's trying to figure out, how can I get out of this? So she ultimately gets out of the car, and Jesse chases her and follows her, but he's still trying to talk sweet to her, like, no, baby. Okay. I'll take you home. Because she's irritated. She's nervous. She's scared. So she's trying to get out of it. And then he chases her. He doesn't let her go willingly. and he talks her back into the vehicle. Promises, I'll take you home. And Dustin's driving. His child is in the front passenger seat. Esther and Jesse are in the back, and the groceries Dustin has purchased are in the back of this Avalanche. So instead of turning left, which would be where Esther was going, home, where she was living at the time, Dustin turns right. And because Esther has been through this in 2018 with Jesse, she really starts to feel panic at this point. Dustin's not going home. She's told them where she lives. Instead, he turns then left on Omaha, and he starts to hightail it toward Oglala. And he does. Esther is so fraught with panic at this point. While she's on Omaha, the car's still moving. She tries to throw herself out of the vehicle to save her life. That is how desperate things were in her mind at that point. And when she does that, when she opens the door and tries to fling herself out, Jesse grabs her in a rear naked chokehold, and he starts strangling her. And he puts her unconscious, and every time she wakes up, and she initially starts to struggle, she starts to scream, tries anyway, and each time she does, he puts her out again to unconsciousness, not just, I'm really going to do it. He does do it. So with every one of those strangulations, you know, if you work in this field, that any one of those could be unconscious. It's just a matter of seconds, not minutes, seconds. So Esther tells later, because she survived, what happened. So Rapid City to Oglala is about 90 minutes, 90 miles. And every time Esther wakes up because she's tried to jump out, Jesse puts her out again, strangles her to unconsciousness. She recalls and told and testified about Jesse strangling her and the 5-year-old turning around in the seat, watching Jesse kill her. And this is illustrative of the type of person Esther was. She remembers saying to this child, "Turn around, baby." I said, "Why did you say that?" She said, "Because he doesn't need to see that." And so while she was being killed, her first thoughts were of other people. Jesse's were not. Dustin's were not. Esther also remembers calling out to Dustin to say, "Help me." And Dustin said, "I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get involved." And he keeps driving. And he's the driver. But for Dustin Sierra, none of this would have happened. None of the rest of this would have happened. But he continues down to their family's property in Oglala, and he does nothing to help her. So nobody hears from Esther until July 17th, 4 days, which is terrifying for the family, absolutely terrifying. And they know, like I've said, they know that she is in grave danger if she's not already dead. All right, so for the period July 13th through the 17th, we knew certain things which were really scary. I mentioned Esther missed her niece's birthday, which is just one of those things that would not have happened if she were okay. Not even if she had been drinking, none of that. She would not have missed it. Her social media accounts were dark, and she was of the generation. She's always on Facebook. She's always on Snapchat. She's always doing that, and there was no activity. Pretty scary. She stops coming to work. She doesn't come home, not for a change of clothes, not for anything. A friend of hers received a Snapchat message, but it was weird. It wasn't like her. It was too short. That person reported the message to law enforcement. First of all, Esther's family, the sisters, repeatedly call Rapid City Police Department, repeatedly are calling OST dispatch to say, "We've heard he's here, we've heard they're here, you need to go check these locations, here's where the Sierra family has residences, she's in danger." And law enforcement is unfortunately a step behind at all turns here. They're trying to track down leads, but they can't find her. Rapid City Police, Pennington County Sheriff's Office are up here looking, but she's already gone. She's already in Oglala as of the 13th, but nobody knows that yet. On the 17th, Esther calls Rapid City Police Dispatch and says, "Hey, I'm Esther Wolfe. I'm missing from Rapid City. Everything's fine. I'm eloping to Nebraska with my boyfriend." We've got the recording. Detective Neville plays it for the family members, and some of the family is like, "That's absolutely her. That's her." And some of the family are like, I don't think that's her. She wouldn't do that. So there was some confusion about, is she fine? Is she not fine? Regardless, the law enforcement know we need to lay eyes on her, because you can't just say, oh, everything's fine? Wonderful. Thanks so much for the call. So that's not what happened, but it was still a situation of grave danger. There were sightings of a vehicle that the Sierra brothers were driving on the reservation, and the sisters were calling law enforcement, trying to get welfare checks done. And OST law enforcement were doing checks at the various Sierra family members' houses, but they all lied. They said, we haven't seen her, we don't know anything, we haven't seen Jesse, we haven't seen Dustin. So, still no sign of Esther. As of the 17th, no sign of her at all until July 21st, 2019, when she, I won't keep this up too long, when she walks into the hospital in Chadron, Nebraska. Chadron emergency room, she walks in looking like that. She says, I'm going to just move that because, I'm going to move it back. She walks in looking like that, and she says, I'm Esther Wolfe. I'm missing out of Rapid City. Jesse says if I don't come meet him at the McDonald's in 2 hours, he's going to come back and kill me. So the Chadron emergency room goes on lockdown for the first time ever, in history ever. They can see her condition, they can see what she's been through, and she calls her sisters, calls her mother, calls her family. They come down. Some of the sisters and a brother come down to Chadron. Law enforcement hasn't located Jesse yet, but the sisters and John Jr. find Jesse in a field, tackle him. Esther's injuries, as you can see just from a second or two, are horrific. She has ligature marks on her wrists, on her neck. She has bruising from head to toe. Her fingers, her breasts, her stomach, her legs. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. So the family, I'm just going to scoot through these really fast. Family tackles Jesse and hold him really until law enforcement get to this field where they've tackled him. Jesse starts crying around about how he's a victim, how he's been beaten and they broke his face and all of these things. So he gets checked out, he gets medically cleared, he's just fine. He goes to the county jail, and he is booked into jail, and he does not get out again. That's what he looked like that night. In comparison to what Esther looked like, you can see that he's absolutely fine. In contrast, and these are days later, so this is much improved, Esther was not fine. And she was remarkable in that she was able to recount details of what had happened to her from the 13th through the 21st with detail like you've never heard before. I mean, you wouldn't believe it if you when you heard it. I mean, thankfully, the law enforcement, the BIA and Steve Neville believed it and started getting in touch with the FBI. They start tracking down evidence to corroborate what she said had happened. So she said she'd been taken to Dustin Sierra's home in Oglala. A white Chevy Avalanche should be there. Sure enough, it was. Esther recounted being sexually assaulted in a room in Dustin's home. She didn't know what it was going to look like when law enforcement finally got there, but she remembered there being a mattress in the bathroom, and it was weird, she said, because the mattress was standing up. And she described in great detail being physically, sexually abused in that particular room. She described what she called the test. So the test was Jesse and Dustin telling her, well, Jesse really, in Dustin's home, telling her, there's law enforcement outside and you better not run. And she's been through quite a bit already, and she thinks she hears somebody outside. She thinks she hears law enforcement. She believes Oglala Sioux Tribe law enforcement is outside Dustin's home. And so when she gets a chance, she bolts from the house when she feels like she's safe and can make a run for it. But there's no police waiting for her. Instead, Jesse Sierra is waiting for her in a blue Chevy Avalanche that his dad had given him to drive. And so she failed the test, and he beat her, and he was going to kill her then, but he didn't. but he made sure that she knew she had failed the test, and if she did it again, he would kill her, and threatened to kill her, and said, well, you failed the test, so things are going to get worse for you now. Esther spoke about how she started leaving her DNA everywhere because she was so sure she was going to die. She was so smart. She was so smart. Despite going through all of this, she was leaving hair, blood, in places where she thought, if the police come look for me, they're going to find at least this. If they never find my body, they're going to find this. So these are pictures of, yes, her blood in the Chevy avalanche where she had been. She described being assaulted, beaten in the avalanche. After Esther, quote, failed the test, Dustin decided to take her to the most remote location you can think of. It's miles off the road. No one would ever have found her if she had been killed out there. Jesse took her to his father's land out in Oglala, near Oglala. Miles and miles of terrain like this and rougher terrain, trees, ravines, nothing out there. No one's driving by at all. Jesse took her to his dad's house, which you can kind of see the edge of it on the picture on the far left of the screen there. Took her there. Jesse's dad saw her, knew she was there with him, did nothing, did not report it, did not help her, nothing. Jesse says, well, I'm going to take you to the camper, the garden. And Esther had mentioned when she was recovered in Chadron, he took me to the garden and he made me dig a grave and he made me get in it. And she mentioned Christmas lights and being strung up with Christmas lights, which it's unbelievable. It's like, what? Really? But her descriptions and her truth-telling was so remarkable. Like, we found everything she said. We found the garden. She was on the phone with the FBI saying, no, it's not that direction. She was their eyes and ears. She is the reason all of this was found. The garden there, to call it a garden anymore is not accurate, but it was there. They stopped there. Jesse grabbed a garden tool, a garden hoe of some kind, a digging tool. Esther mentioned a camper she'd been to. Well, there's no one camping out there, but sure as heck, FBI finds this camper where she said she'd been, where she'd been beaten, she'd been raped, she'd been strangled, and she had left more breadcrumbs, so to speak, in case she were not recovered alive. Just disgusting conditions, but he took her here and he held her here captive for a day, maybe two. And she mentioned leaving things here. So you can see the blue shirt, you can see Christmas lights. That blue shirt is the same one Esther was wearing at the Hilton Garden Inn when she was working. Her shoe was there, her shirt was there. She's just leaving little clues. I was here, I was here, I was here. Throughout her ordeal. She mentioned there being a box that she'd been kept in, and she was. She'd been stomped down into this camper box, and she was held there overnight. She was nailed inside. I don't know if you can see from this picture, but there's fence post nails on the outside. And he kept her in there, and he stomped her down into it. It's smaller than this lectern here, and Esther was a tiny person, but she didn't fit, so he made her fit, is how she described it. That's her blood in the box. She said it would be there. She said she broke a board to try to get some more air. Keep in mind, this was July of 2019. It's hot. No air conditioning, no light, nothing. So he nailed her inside, and she recounted how he slept on top of the box. And she remembered watching the sunrise on this particular morning through the cracks in this box, thinking that it was probably the last one she was going to see. And law enforcement found it because Esther was amazing. Esther walked the FBI by phone through the ravine. So FBI agent Steve Beery is walking the terrain at Mike Sierra's home. There's no way we're going to find this grave, right? There's no way any of this is out there. But as Steve is walking, he sees this ravine, and it's exactly as Esther is describing it to him, being his eyes and ears. And he comes across this and this. And it's a garden hoe, if you can see it. It blends in pretty well, but it's there. And this is, like I said, the middle of nowhere. And had Esther been unable to recount what happened, we certainly never would have found it. So we find the garden hoe, the grave, Christmas lights in the grass next to the grave. Esther testified and told us many times about how he made her get in the grave. I don't remember if he dug it or he made her dig it. Doesn't matter. She gets into it, and then he has a change of heart, so to speak. He says, "No, we can make this work." Unbelievably, right? After all of this, we can make this work. What you're going to do is you're going to tell the police that somebody ganged you up in Rapid City. Somebody else did it, not me. We're in love, and if you don't tell the police, we can make this work, and I'll let you live. So Esther makes that bargain. Okay, all right. So he lets her get out of the grave. From there, Jesse took Esther to his mother's house. She saw him. Jesse's uncle saw her. Jesse's mom saw her. They did nothing. They did not call the police. They did not help her. They did not call anyone for her. No one. Instead, they gave her pain medications and let Jesse borrow the mom's phone. And while Jesse's standing over her, he makes Esther call Rapid City Police Dispatch. So we know this happened on July 17th because we have the call. These pictures are of Jesse's mother's house. And as I've said, Esther was leaving things everywhere. She said, "My niece's phone is in there. It's the phone I had with me. It's black. It has an Apple sticker on the back." Yep, it was in there, right where Esther said it would be. Another breadcrumb that shows this happened to me. I was here. He did these things. So Jesse makes her make the call, and they are en route to Nebraska. Either at the time the call is made or shortly thereafter. Oh, my battery went. Thank you. Sorry about that. So Dustin picks them up again and takes them to another brother's house in Crawford, Nebraska. Dustin has not called the police, has not called for help. The other brother does not call for police, does not call for help for Esther. But they see her and they know what condition she's in. And it's real similar to how she looked when she shows up at the hospital. So Jesse rents a room at the Hilltop Motel and in somebody else's name and hides her out there for 2 days. And her injuries at this point are so severe that, according to Esther, Jesse says, "He thought I was going to die because my face was so swollen. He was afraid the infection would get in my face, in my bloodstream, and I would die." So that is the point, evidently, at which Jesse decides, "I'm going to take her to the hospital," not because he cared, because he didn't want to get in trouble, I guess, for her death, I guess. Esther described there being a cup of noodles in this motel room. She described Jesse getting her bags of ice for her face in hopes that the swelling would go down, because she could not be seen in public like that and not have someone be concerned. You could see that. So when Nebraska law enforcement goes into the motel room, they're able to see all of the clues Esther said would be there. I'm going to get to the prosecution. So 2019, we charged Jesse and Dustin. I charged Jesse with both the 2018 and the 2019 kidnappings, and charged Dustin, the brother, the driver, as an aider and abetter, which means he's as responsible as the principal. I mean, yeah, he's less culpable in the sense that he didn't touch her, but he didn't save her either. He didn't do anything to help her. During the prosecution, I said we charged it in 2019. We didn't go to trial until October of 2022, finally. So it was a solid 3 years of just being harassed by the two defendants' lawyers. They were dead set on insisting that Esther had been jumped by drug dealers in Rapid City, that none of this happened, that medical records which showed she had had miscarriages meant, no, she's had abortions and therefore she's a bad person, right? They were absolutely fascinated with and fixated on getting that before the jury, but we successfully kept that out. All of the typical domestic violence defenses, right? Well, she loved him. They'd had a marriage license. They loved each other. All of that was true. She did love him at times. They did have a marriage license once. They tried to say that the blood that Esther was leaving everywhere was menstrual blood. How offensive. They tried to bring in family members to say, they're bad people, they can't be trusted. The initial response by law enforcement, you can see all the evidence, but it really was a serious situation. And I think lessons were learned in how to respond to situations of acute danger like this. Jesse tried to say it was consensual, that Esther liked rough sex, that it was just an absolute circus of trying to knock down all of this insanity. And thankfully, Judge Schreier did not let most of that stuff in. Let's see, trial, like I said, October of 2022. We had been ready to go many times. I had 2 different trial partners, ultimately tried it with Kelsey Blair. But we just were faced with delay after delay. We'd get up to trial and then Jesse or Dustin would be like, panic, right? Like something else would come up. And so part of what Esther had to survive was getting built up, ready for trial, and then it's not going, sorry. It's not going. Well, why? Like, we're ready. Well, because the defendants, they want a continuance, and this is, they're the ones who have all the rights right now, really, is what it came down to. So October of 2022, that's me, SASMA at the time, we called Esther. And despite all of this physical evidence, all of this video, photographic, DNA evidence that we had from Rapid City, from the reservation, from Nebraska, it still came down to Esther. Like, there was no witness to most of this, just her. It was her and Jesse for most of this, and he wasn't going to say. Dustin wouldn't testify against Jesse, refused. We tried to get Dustin to do the right thing, and he refused. Neither one testified at trial. So we had to call Esther after. In hindsight, I'm grateful for the years of relationship building that we had, because she testified for almost 6 hours. Most of that was cross-examination. The direct examination from us was pretty straightforward. I wasn't going to, be gratuitous about it to the extent I could avoid it. But she withstood hours and hours of cross-examination about how, she was bad, she loved him, she liked rough sex and all of these things. She withstood it like a champ. She had to recount the years of abuse that she suffered at his hands. This is part of the transcript. She remembered things like this, littler stuff in hindsight, being hit in the head with a phone and being isolated from her family. You can see at the bottom. What would Jesse do, if anything, to try to hide the physical abuse that he perpetrated on you? He'd keep me from my family. So there were periods in the relationship where she was totally isolated from her family, who were her cheerleaders, and still are. This is another portion of the trial transcript. We talked about strangulation. We called Dr. Ann Fisher, who's on the Wavy board and has decades of emergency medical experience, and she testified about the lethality of strangulation and how any one of those strangulations that were inflicted upon Esther could have killed her. We were going to call Krista Herron-Graber as a domestic violence expert, but then there was a ruling that said, well, if you bring in a DV expert, I'm going to let in evidence of past miscarriages, abortions, because that's what the defense was calling them. That's not what it was. Past domestic violence history with other people, other relationships. So we closed the door on that and decided not to risk it or to put Esther through that. Ultimately, after a week of trial, they were convicted of everything they were charged with, thankfully, both. We didn't want to let Dustin off the hook because he was, in our mind, just as culpable, even though he didn't touch Esther. He could have stopped all of it. Jesse, guilty of kidnapping, aggravated sexual abuse by force, 2 different ways, multiple locations. That doesn't mean just 2 rapes. It was many. She stopped counting, she testified to. Interstate domestic violence, assault resulting in serious bodily injury, assault by strangulation of a dating partner. Sentencing was February 10th, 2023, in front of Judge Karen Schreier. Dustin's was unremarkable in the fact that he said he was sorry, he maintained his innocence, maintained he shouldn't be punished. fine. He got just over 10 years for his role in this. Jesse was sentenced to life on 2 counts in 120 months, 10 years on the rest of the counts. So he's serving 2 life sentences. The judge commented at sentencing, well, after Jesse spoke, Esther was there at sentencing. Many of the sisters were, many of the family were. Jesse used his allocution time to say, Esther, come on, you know you hit me too. Come on, tell the truth, Esther. Tell the truth, Esther. It was terribly painful for her, terribly angering for all of us. And the judge told him, you know, I didn't come in here planning to give you life necessarily, but you've shown that you're not subject, like you're not remorseful. You'll do it again. You can't be out among society again when this is, you know, this is your response to this woman who you nearly killed many times. This is only a small part of the trial team. I've never tried a case alone, so to speak. Like, yeah, I've been the prosecutor, but there's always victim specialists. There's always nurses. There's always law enforcement. There's always forensic scientists. There's always a whole team that never gets the shout out. But this was after the sentencing. That's Esther in the middle, Kelsey Blair to Esther's right, Steve Beery, Danny Dosh, some of the family members, some of whom are here. That was after the sentencing. It was a good day. Eric Kelderman, who's now going to be a judge in the 7th Circuit, was my first intended trial partner. He ended up doing the appeal, which I'll get to in a second. Esther had been in custody for something at the end of 2024, and I hadn't seen her. She'd been struggling, I think is fair to say. She wrote a letter to me and the trial team on Christmas of this last year, and I won't read it to you. But she said, it's hard to read up there, but some of what she said was, "I'm done surviving or being in survival mode. I'm going to turn my pain into something, maybe even help other women in similar situations. Anyways, my smile's brighter and my shine's still there. He didn't win, we did." You may have seen on the slide that one of the things the defense was going to try to do was say that Esther had killed her past boyfriend. His name was Michael Mayweather. Michael Mayweather killed himself in February of 2019, if I have the date, the timeline right. Esther and he were dating at that time. She had broken it off with Jesse, was not with him anymore, and was essentially a witness to Michael Mayweather's suicide tragically. On February 21st of this year, Michael Mayweather's brother and a friend are alleged now and charged with orchestrating and committing her murder. She was killed on February 21st of this year, allegedly by those people. They are presumed innocent, of course, though that situation is ongoing in state court here. But that just goes to show you the level of harassment that Esther suffered throughout her life, just by people who wanted to do her dirty and to just like stick it to her at every level. Like she was smart. You've seen her in her worst days. She was smart. She was wickedly funny. She was an athlete. She was hilarious. She was a good sister. She was a good daughter. She was a good auntie. She was so many things that cannot be encompassed by this, and which never got talked about at trial. But I think she would have been somebody who would be up here talking to people, helping people like her. I know she would have. I know she would have gotten to that point if she'd been given the chance. But she wasn't. A week after she was killed, we got notice from the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals that her convictions, Jesse and Dustin's convictions, but were hers. I mean, she won those. She did that. Were affirmed on appeal, which means Jesse will be dying in prison. He will serve 2 life sentences. He will not get out. Dustin will serve his 10, and he'll be out among us again someday, but Jesse won't. So it's no comfort, it's no consolation because she's not here, but at least he won't be out here. So this presentation really, it's really about Esther. She was so remarkable. She changed my life. She made me change how I deal with victims. she made me recognize that it is important to build up time. If we had had trial in 4 months on this case, she wouldn't have trusted me. She wouldn't have let me walk her through that. We wouldn't have been able to do it. And it was just as a result of who she was, and I present this because we all know Esther Wolfes. Maybe not at this point in their life, maybe not at the point that they're walking into a Shadron hospital, but that wasn't the first abuse Esther suffered. She'd been vulnerable, she'd been exploited, she'd been traumatized. So we all see Esthers every day in this work that we do at some point on the spectrum, be it the first time they call law enforcement, be it the first time they trust an advocate or go to a shelter or tell a friend, this is happening to me. So I hope Esther's story brings inspiration and not just horror and sadness. I hope it brings inspiration because she really did matter. And if we can just meet people where they are and recognize that if we aren't able to give people these interventions and stability that they need when they're way early in this awful journey that they're sometimes on, then the worst can happen. And I also tell Esther's story because she is missing and murdered Indigenous people. She is murdered now. She was missing and nearly murdered. And this level of violence that I see every day against Indigenous women, the prolonged nature, maybe not, but I see violence like this every day. I see people getting hit in the head with beer cans and cut and beat and raped every day. So we need to keep in mind that, yes, this is an extreme example, and thank God she survived it. But I hope it inspires you to do what you can right there when somebody's in your office or in your home or in your shelter or wherever, so that we can not have this happen, so that we can not have it end up like this as like it's such a great trial success story. It's not, because look what it had to come to. You know what I mean? She meant a lot to a lot of people. I'm not the only one, obviously. So if I may, some of Esther's family is here. They're right in front here. I know this is painful for you. I know it is. Would you stand and let us recognize you, please? They're right up here, right up front. The Wolfe family, please, everybody. Would you just support them? They really have been and continue to be Esther's voice. They continue to be in state court. They continue to be on social media. They continue to fight these fights for their sister, who they love so much and who is gone now. We can do, I'm probably out of time, right? Probably. If you need to call me, I'll talk this afternoon about our missing and murdered regional coordinator, Troy Morley. But you can call me too. This is my office number. That's my email address. I'm here. I'm a resource for you all. If you have cases like this, if you need answers, I can help you get those. Thank you, everybody.